Have tea with the principal, have ice cream at this hour. We're going to come through and serve you water while you're in line. And we got to 97%. Any
You're
problem
making me
is
want to come
solvable.
to your school. You're making me want to come. What do you say to the folks who would just out and out say, math is boring?
You haven't had good math teachers. Teacher can give you a homework assignment. I'll say, hey, go home and watch the game tonight. Mathematics is not about getting the right answer.
So here we are, Assata. Thank you very much for joining one of our first episodes of Always Learning. We really appreciate you coming on today.
I think I appreciate being here more, but we'll see.
Well, I just gave you, before we started, this premise that so many of us, especially in our community, think that math is for other people. Many of us have math anxiety. Many of us that are parents, for sure, are capable of passing on that math anxiety to our children because they bring home math from school. And it's one of the things that they ask us for help for, that we oftentimes have a lot of nervousness about whether or not we're going to be able to do it. And then we meet someone like you, someone who proclaims themselves as the black math genius, which is such a great identity to have, like saying, no, I am math is my identity, is part of my identity, and it's culturally appropriate for me to, and whatever. This is an example I have not seen enough of, and we need more of you. But how did that happen? How did it happen that you became this person that was so interested in math?
And ironically, the Black Math Genius actually refers to the students that I'm working with. And so that's why I loved your story about how Always Learning came about, because I started volunteering I was at Michigan State University engineering student, started volunteering at African Center Charter School. And I was doing with them what I was doing in my engineering class. And I'm talking about elementary school students. And so I said, man, these children are geniuses. And that was in the mid 90s. And so throughout my educational career, I have yet to meet a child that does not have genius within them. And it's about how you deliver instruction to educe. And if you look at the root word of education, it's educe, to bring out. And so our job as educators is to figure out, as educators and parents, how to educe out of our children their genius. And mathematics in particular in our community, in Chicago these days, the young folks are saying is crazy behind everything. So they'll say, man, you doing a podcast is crazy. So I'm saying us having mathematics anxiety is crazy because it is Black people that gifted the world mathematics. Over 40,000 years ago, there's proof of this. There was a Lubombo bone found in the Lubombo mountain region of South Africa that shows that more than likely, not only was it Black people, but probably a Black woman that first started this idea of mathematics. And the markings on the bone shows that she was keeping track of her cycle against the lunar calendar. And then 15,000 years after that, you get into Central Africa, and there's the Ishango bone that shows that the mathematics at this point has now advanced. So now there are different columns. You have multiples of threes, multiples of fours, what looks like prime numbers. So the idea that Black people have this anxiety of mathematics is not rooted in that we can identify and relate to mathematics. It's rooted in this system that we've had to learn in America. And so it's not about the mathematics, it's about the environment that we've been in.
What do you think gets lost? So, you delivered math instruction, you learned some things in a setting where, a lot of our kids are. What do you think gets lost in trying to teach math?
The essence of mathematics itself. Mathematics is not about getting the right answer. Think about a doctor that's been studying cures for cancer their whole career. Someone says, yes, I'm an oncologist and I study cures for cancer. We're going to be amazed, like, wow. But think about it. So far, they've got every single thing wrong. We don't consider them a failure because they haven't found a cure yet, right?
Right.
Mathematics is not about getting something right or wrong. It is about discovery. Mathematics is a beautiful language of the universe. We use it to communicate in all of the other disciplines. When you look at medicine, it comes down to those prescriptions, how many milligrams based on this body weight. When you look at the pandemic that we recently had, that was calculus. How is it changing at what rate over what period of time? If you look at the spread of a rumor, by the time you post something on social media, how long is it going to take to spread to this amount of people over what period of time? That is calculus. That is a derivative, something changing over a period of time. So mathematics is a beautiful language of the universe. What's lost is in the translation from the educator that's not well versed in the discipline to the student.
What do you say to the folks who would just out and out say, math is boring? Math is like, I hate math. I hate math class. I don't think that there's another subject that gets that type of common response as much as
Yes.
math does. So
Yes.
what do we do about the boring factor, the relevancy factor, the people seeing why this is even important? How do we get across that bridge?
You haven't had good math teachers. Teacher can give you a homework assignment that, hey, figure out fraction, decimals, and percents for these two problems. I'll say, hey, go home and watch the game tonight. Watch the basketball game. I want you to track these players, these students. I want you to track these players. Tomorrow we're going to come back. We're going to take a look at how many field goals they attempted, how many they made. And then we're going to do the stats on that, which is nothing but the mathematics of it. So instead of having a computer do it, we're going to do it. Maybe I'm also going to have the basketball hoop on the back of my classroom, and it's going to get kind of noisy, right? But learning is noisy. It's going to get kind of noisy, and they're going to take some shots. And I can do it in different ways. I can do it where they have a denominator of 10 to keep the mathematics simple, or I can do it where they're doing it within a period of time to see how many shots they're going to get. And now the fraction is going to get more complicated. Okay, I can take football and I can turn that into mathematics where I'm dealing with vectors that have magnitude and direction and which way they need to throw the ball, which also has a grid. And we can get into the Cartesian coordinate plane, right? And then you want to tell the stories about it. Well, how did the Cartesian coordinate plane even come about? Well, Descartes, looking up in the ceiling late at night, probably has a few drinks in him, right? And he sees this flies on the wall and he determines that he can figure out the position using 2 points. Okay. So, what do we enjoy? Entertainment is about telling good stories, it's about making it relevant, making it interesting. We love entertainment because it's fulfilling in a certain way. We get to watch and it taps into the different senses. You have the ebb and flow of what's going to happen next. Mathematics should be the same thing.
When you think about making it more relevant, you just gave a couple examples of how it could be taught in a way that you already have some background knowledge, coming to it. So it's not brand new to you. You're not, having to adopt like a brand new language. Do you think that there's a way for us to arm enough teachers to be able to teach that way to get to all of our kids? Because it feels like the supply and demand of teachers that are wanting to teach in that way. I mean, I'm just going to be real. Maybe you don't want to teach that way. Maybe, you're used to the way that it's always been done. And, I had teachers that had said to me, listen, I get paid whether you learn or not, um, if you have really found a way that could work with our students, do you have a sense of how we can train more teachers and get more people interested in teaching relevant mathematics?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you ask, can we find that? Well, we're always able to find enough soldiers that's willing to go on into other countries and leave their families and to be killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's no possible way that you're telling me that you can't find enough teachers that you say, hey, here's the promise of staying home with your family, not going into physical war. We're going to pay you more and we're going to give you the proper training that a lot of times we're not dealing with this conversation that the colleges themselves aren't providing because we're
Mm-hmm.
putting a lot of the weight on what teachers are doing when they get into the classroom or what they aren't doing. But we're not saying, well, who's training them? When we look at children acting a fool, we say, what are your parents? So when you look at educators
Yeah.
that just left 4 years of college that they probably paid $250,000 for, we should be saying, who trained you all? It's the universities that are getting off scot free. We're not having that conversation. So can it be done? Absolutely, it can be done. And so part of what we do with Black Math Genius, every single Friday, I took people from across the country and as far as way as Indonesia and India, and they are great mathematicians. And we train them every Friday in the Black Math Genius way on how to now take that mathematics that you're so good with it and make it relevant. make connections with it, where you can take place value, our decimal 10 Hindu Arabic number system that many Americans are opposed to calling it the Hindu Arabic number system because they don't know the basics of things, right? And you can take that and you can apply it to binary numbers. You can apply it to hexadecimal numbers. You can get cultural with it and apply the vigesimal decimal system out of West Africa and other parts of South America. So you can bring other cultures in, and it's respectful because now it's not just about all of these old white men that contributed to mathematics, but it's about people from around the world that have made contributions to this discipline. So can it be done? Absolutely, it can be done. And it's not that difficult. You just have to want to do it.
Mm.
So when I said too many of my parents in high school are not showing up to conferences, it was less than 25% parents were showing up for conference. You know what I said I wanted? I said I wanted 100%. And then once you set a goal, like we do in life, you would do what? You write down the steps to get to that goal. And I said, here's how we're going to do it. We're on the south side of Chicago. We love Harris Chicken on the south side of Chicago. Make sure we have 3 pans of Harris Chicken. We're going to put together a menu. Parents usually run into babysitting issues. Let's pay the seniors to set up a babysitting room with video games so that the parents can bring their children. We'll take that obstacle out of the way. What about the parents who are going to be really upset and don't want to deal with their children? You know what? Let's bring out a masseuse. We're going to have a room. Hey, did your children just drive you crazy with those bad grades? Get a quick massage, right? Have tea with the principal. Have ice cream at this hour. We're going to come through and serve you water while you're in line. And we got to 97%. Any problem
You're making me want to come to your school. You're making me want to come. I don't even have a child there, and I'm feeling like, well, wait, I might show up.
But yes, the problem is solvable. You can go in, you can train people, you can meet with these department chairs. What about mathematician department chairs with the engineering professor working with the College of Education and saying, how can we make this more relevant? So yeah, it's absolutely possible. You just have to want to do it.
And you, in your own lifetime, did this come easy to you?
Yes.
I mean, is it one of those things where you're like a prodigy? Is it like one of those things where you have a natural inherent gift?
I think so. I've met many students that I believe that will, make me eat their dust in mathematics or whatever it is. What happened for me, I remember being in a 4th, 5th, 6th grade split, and I had a teacher, and she made caramel. We were doing fractions, and I was struggling with these mixed fractions. And she came in and did this cooking activity. And mathematics just clicked for me from there. And then I've just always gone along the path of following mathematics. So it's something that I enjoy. I can look at certain things. I can be on a run and see a spider web and look at that, longitudinal lines versus, linear lines and what these spiders did with that. So it's a discipline that I enjoy. And I know that many more people can enjoy, because that's what I get all the time. Whenever I do a presentation, adults say, man, I wish I was in your class. I would have did much better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I kind of think that myself. Like in listening to you talk about it, it was never relevant to me in terms of like, it always felt like it was somebody else's lesson about somebody else's life.
Yep.
And the examples that were given, a lot of it felt like drill and kill. Kind of, when I hear you say that, math is a beautiful language, I don't think it was ever presented to us as a beautiful language. It almost felt like a chore that you had to do, and you just had to like drill and kill it out and rote memorization. In your lifetime, especially as a person that's been focused on mathematics, have you seen higher level kind of fights about math and how it should be taught? Because you have a lot of parents who will say, listen, this is different than the way that I learned it. It doesn't even look the same. And I don't think we're always aware of what's changing in the world of mathematics. Like, in reading, there are reading wars. There are people that are like, arguing about how we should teach reading. Should it be phonics? Should it not be phonics? What's happening in the world of math in your lifetime, even about how it's changed, or has it changed?
Yeah, there's a disconnect between research and action, and that's what's happening. So there's a book by Li Ping Ma out of China, like in the 80s. So we're talking somewhere 30, 40 years ago. Phenomenal book where she went through and compared mathematics in the United States versus China. And it was just overwhelming how much better Chinese instructors, first of all, studied mathematics. So they didn't have a full schedule of having to teach. Maybe half of their day was teaching, but then the other half, it was a professional learning environment. So they were able to constantly study. In the United States, you become a teacher, and it's as if you have learned it all and there's no more study. So what I'm saying is I'm doing both. I'm still always learning and reading. Out of California, you have Joe Boiler that has done mathematical mindsets, and she has a lot of books on that. So there's really a disconnect between the research and the action, because the research is really good, but I'm not seeing it being applied, because the research is saying the things that I'm saying about mathematics. The application is not happening. And part of it is because teachers have gone through the traditional schooling and they have not come across that research. That's why I say that college piece has to be revamped. Like every math teacher should know about Lee Ping Ma and Joe Boiler. Okay. And they should know about the Algebra Project by Bob Moses and the history behind that in the South. They should
Now,
know.
for people who don't know much about that, tell us a little bit about that Algebra Project, because I found out about that way later in life, and I thought, wow, this is something that if this had been popularized, I would have keyed in on more math and cared more about it. So tell us a little bit about that project, the Algebra Project.
And so Brother Bob Moses was actually started off fighting in the civil rights movement. And what he wanted to do was to go into places down south, in particular in Mississippi, and start working with Black students to get them ready for algebra. And it actually started with him helping his daughter with her homework. And he found the same thing that I found, like, man, these children are geniuses. And he had great success with it, but it was a struggle. And he was also still fighting the civil rights aspect, because when you read his book, so much of the book is actually about the civil rights fight and not so much about the Algebra Project. But he's had amazing returns. But also you have Dr. Abdul-Alim Shabazz. And at one point, he was responsible for over 80% of the Black PhDs in the country. And not many people know about him. Another Black man, Onion Palmer, out of California, started the Marcus Garvey School, one of the best science fairs I'd ever seen in my life. The level of projects that those students were doing. So you have lots of models of excellence. The KIPP schools that got their stuff from Harriet Ball, they stole her stuff. This was a Black woman. And she came to the school one time, and this was during a time when the song Whoop, There It Is was out. And she would do her mathematics piece and be like, whoop, there it is. And I was hooked. I'm like 20 something years old. So, but we're not seeing those models. Imagine if more Black scholars, teachers, educators had some serious input on how this mathematics piece and education in general is rolled out, because you have excellence models of this. But unfortunately, right now, or however you look at it, 70% plus, in some cases, 80 to 90% of our educators are white women that do not share the culture of the students of whom they are teaching. And that's especially having an impact, in particular, on young Black boys.
See, we've been saying for years that, like, what's the quote? Like, when America catches a cold, Black folks get pneumonia.
Right. Yes.
When we talk about math outcomes, we do focus a lot on Black kids, and talk about achievement gaps. But the fact of the matter is that math results, period, in the United States are not good for anybody, right? So that tells me that there's a pretty big problem, like a global problem, in a lot of probably what you just gave us is in terms of a reason, which is there is research of how this can be done better.
Right.
There are countries, and it turns out there are a lot of Asian countries that are doing better at this than we are. I've heard people say things, and I don't know that this is true or not, but I've heard people talk about like how thin textbooks our math books are in some other countries.
Oh, I've been to West Africa and Finland, and they're very thin. I purchased some. They're like this. And it's not all the pictures and they're crushing us in West Africa. Walking to school all those miles, books are this small per grade level, and it's getting to the content. But then also it's the cultural piece. You're not dealing with the behavior norms that you're dealing with in class as well. And there's a culture around that education is important. And so we also had this cultural piece to deal with over here. But you mentioned the achievement gap, and I like to refer to it as the belief gap. We do not believe in the intellect of Black children the same way that we believe in the intellect of others. Because if we did, we would be outraged that they weren't performing. And we would put our resource, say, wait a minute, something isn't right here, because we know these children are capable, and we would fix it. And so we let that slide. But you're right in that. And so when the pandemic happened, grades across the country just dropped. California dropped so bad that they ended up tied somewhere with Alabama, right? And so, but it was like a 3% or whatever, 3-point drop for the country. It was 4 times as much, a 12-point drop for Black students who were already behind, now significantly more behind. And so what happens with that is that, how do you determine who's going to be the wealth builders in the future? You look at test scores, in particular mathematics, because the top 60 careers of the future are all STEM related. So if they're not doing well there, that's why you have this, what is it called? The report, the path to zero wealth, the road to zero wealth, that's predicting in 30 years, Black people have a median net worth of $0. How are they able to determine that we're going to have zero net worth in 30 years? They're looking at our children's test scores. That's how. So it's a serious problem that has long-term impact. And this came from the Federal Reserve Banks are looking at this data. And I'm telling people, look at who's doing the research: the Brookings Institutes, the Heritage Foundations, the different Federal Reserve Banks out of New York, and I forget where the other one was at that I was looking at, maybe Minnesota somewhere. But it's a huge problem that we're not paying enough attention to.
That's a math problem too, ironically.
Poverty is a math problem itself.
Yeah.
Just always look
when
at the
you
numbers.
say to me, what was the year that you just said? So the zero wealth.
By the year 2053. It's called the Road to Zero Wealth Report.
Okay.
And you can look that up, and it's predicting that by the year 2053, in just 30 years, that Black people will have a median net worth of $0. Our wealth since 2013. In 2013, our net worth fell below that of Hispanic families, and it has been on a decline ever since. There's a direct parallel to how we're showing up in STEM fields. We are choosing majors that when we do, what's happening is we're running away from math, because when you get to college, you can say, this is what I want to major in. You don't have to follow a set curriculum, right? So they're choosing majors where they don't have to take a lot of math. And in running away from the math, they're running towards poverty. Because you can choose engineering or you can choose psychology. You're going to pay the same amount. Okay. You're going to have the same amount of student loans, but what's your salary going to be when you leave there? Right. So it's like, having $100,000 and deciding to buy, a Ford Pinto versus getting a Bentley. Why would you do that? Right.
Now you're talking my language now. Cause as I think about this, and I think about, like, I've got 3 kids that are heading towards college age. Right. And I've already now started talking, especially since there's 3 of them, about, listen, you're going to need to block and tackle about how you're going to be able to get into college, how you're going to be able to get scholarships, because, it's a math problem. Right. And all of what you just said is a math problem. No one ever sat down with me and ever broke down the math of majors, for instance. Like, what you just said, you could go for the psychology degree, or you could go for the, which many people in retail have psychology degrees. Yep. But you're going to have the same student loans. And they're still, when you think about the lifelong cost of those, how long it's going to take to pay them, how much of your wealth it's going to take from you, it kind of makes the counseling decision that we do for our young people more of a math problem. Like, teach them the math. That's relevant. Yes. How long do you want to be broke after you graduate from college, right?
Yes.
Meanwhile, there's people that graduate from 2-year and 4-year programs that make, starting $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 if they've chosen the right major, the right field, right?
I tell, college students, I said, look, depending on what major you choose, some of these majors, you would be better off staying with your parent for 4 years, working at Walmart, getting a raise, not having a student loan debt, making that salary, and then moving out from your parents after you've been able to stack at least half of those checks and be in a much better position than going to get that trash degree that you're in line for. And that's just the reality of the situation. But no one is having that conversation with them, because I was at a college this summer in Michigan, and I went through and I said, because I was supposed to be doing, introductory math. I said, listen, the most important mathematics in your life, number one, is health and wealth. So we're going to start there. And then it's the mathematics that you're going to need for your majors. We went through and they were asking things like about what it means for a credit score, and they were all in. They were asking, I had them determine where you want to live and what you want to major in. This is about how much you're going to make. What do you need to divide that by? And we got to 26. You get paid every 2 weeks, right? Okay, now multiply that by about 0.7%, because you're going to have to pay taxes. You want to contribute to your retirement. So we went through that whole process. There were so many questions that these 18, 19, and 20-year-olds had, because no one is exposing them to the mathematics of living. They think, like I thought at the time, that you're going to get a college degree and you're going to be set. And it does not work that way at all.
We've been taught that for many years. We've been told that, right? Just go to college.
Yes.
And what you are introducing is something I've thought a lot about, which is, go to college, but also be smart about what you're going for, right? There are just very clearly some that are poverty persisting majors, and there are some that are poverty ending majors. And I think what you just said a minute ago, even too, about like being honest with our young people, we have counselors that tell us how we can get around math, right? So you get to the college level and you literally get counseled on, if you take this logic or you take this other thing, you won't have to do the hard math classes. So now you're being counseled into kind of lower expectations of life, right?
Which is now tracking at the college level, right?
Oh, I mean, that's depressing. But yes, that's tracking for grown folk,
right?
Which makes it even worse,
Yes.
But everything you just said. So I do want to go back to one other thing that you mentioned, but everything you just said is an argument in my mind for living mathematics on how to live and how to exist in a capitalist country. How do you calculate car loans? How do you calculate interest?
Right.
What is a good mortgage interest rate? Why do people buy more than one property, and how do they do it? Where are people's wealth really coming from? When you know that whole thing about the millionaire next door, how did they make that happen? Right. What type of dumb things are we doing on a daily basis that are ruining our chance at wealth? Well, all of those things are math. And I would have been more interested in that, being very honest with you, all along, than I was in the way that math was being taught to me that didn't feel like it had anything to do with life.
Folks are. And here's how you know that they're into it. These classes that when I go and do these special things, those college students that I was working with, we met for 5 hours a day. Ain't no way you can tell a person they're going to have a math class for 5 hours and they be all in and engaged. When I was in New York this summer, right, it was for 3 hours. One of the activities that we did in New York, we went up to, I was in the Flatbush area. They called it Junction. And they was like, Miss Moore, you about to have us walk up to the Junction? We're going to get shot. I said, yeah, we're going to check out, because there were so many stores. It was like Flatbush, Nordstrom. It was right outside of Brooklyn College. And so I said, yeah, we're going to do the mathematics because I want you all to understand wealth. Because they keep talking about how Black women are starting so many more businesses. That is so meaningless. They're sole proprietorships. They're not creating additional jobs. And when you look at the income, the revenue being generated compared to Hispanic businesses, it's almost 4 times as much, about 6 times as much for Asian businesses. And when you compare it to white women businesses, it's like 230 something times as much revenue. So it's meaningless, right? But that's the mathematics. So we go out and they go into all of the businesses and they're asking, who is the owner? About how much do you bring in? So they're trying to determine who the owner. These children thought that because it was so many Black workers in Brooklyn, that they were Black-owned businesses. They didn't realize that the people that's selling you the Jordans and selling you the hoodies and selling you the snacks that they're Indian, they're white, they're Jewish in your community starting businesses. And that shows how much they don't understand about wealth creation and home ownership. But then you ask, well, how many of you have a landlord? And all of the hands are going up. So what I'm pointing out to you all have no opportunities at building wealth. You're simply consumers. You're simply consumers. And so we had that conversation again, the importance of, getting in a position where you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck so that you can take your additional income, turn it into savings and investments, and then you buy a property and then another property, right? And then you invest in an ETF and you invest in a mutual fund if your employer has a matching retirement. So those conversations around wealth is what I also intertwine in the mathematics, because all of the standards that you're talking about in mathematics, you can still apply. So you don't have to necessarily use the curriculum, if you will. But if folks understood and got mathematics that way, because this has been my experience for the past almost 30 years, they love it. They love it. So if it's boring, I mean, who wants boring?
No one wants boring. I don't want boring.
Right.
And you know what? If it's taught this way, it makes more sense to me. I have more kind of frames of reference to understand what it is you're trying to teach me. When you start talking about wealth building and you start talking about what other people are doing to actually increase their wealth, some of that feels very mysterious until someone actually breaks it down to you and tells you this is how compounding, dividends work. This is how, interest works. This is how wealth works. But we have a lot of adults in our community that have not been trained on that.
Right.
And haven't been prepared on purpose. Haven't been. You mentioned some other communities. So there's two things. When I said I wanted to go back to something, it was what you said about culture. And you said, like in West Africa, for instance, there's a different culture around education, which creates a different environment for being educated. I wonder what you think about what we do in the United States. Number one, to create a culture of mathematics for us in our community, but also create the enabling culture that you said, one, to close the belief gap, but also because the belief gap is shared by all of us. I just want to put this out there. When I've talked about the belief gap in the past, I have seen it. People have heard me say this before. The difference between our kids, what our kids are capable of, and the difference between that and what the adults in their life think that they're capable of. And there is a gap between those two things. The gap between the true potential of our children and what the adults in their lives think is their true potential is the real gap. So the culture of how we think about this and we think about math, you mentioned, the Asian community, the Latino community. The black dollar in the United States makes one lap before it goes out of the community. The Asian dollar makes like 7 or 8 laps within the Asian community before it goes out into the mass, the greater world. The Latino community is about somewhere in between those two, like 5 or 6 times. They have a culture of self-preservation and self-investment. So they take care of their needs in ways which the money stays within their communities. And that happened for the Italians, that happened for the Polish, that happened for so many emerging groups in the United States, that was their ascendancy. While they were ascending that way, we were being redlined into low opportunity zones where we weren't getting the business loans, the housing loans, and all of that. So we have some catch up to do, I think, in some ways. That's a long way of getting to the question, which is how do we create this as a culture? How do we have a unified culture around this?
So the one thing is the mathematics and what you're saying about that is true, but I tried to research that to find the research, and I came across something that said that research never happened. So I think that's just an urban myth, that there's never been a study on how long the dollar circulates in any community. However, there is some truth to that, and we just know that, right? And others know that. Now, the unity piece, part of the reason I don't like saying black and brown, because when you group black people with others, it so much diminishes the historical context of black people. No other people experience what black people experience. And so the solutions will not be the same. And we have to think back in the 60s, that was an ideal time for us. People were fighting. There was unity. Think about it. We had the what was it? The one classroom schoolhouses, right? Black people were educating their own. So you have to ask yourself, what happened from the 60s, just 60 years ago, up until say the 90s or early 2000s? What happened in 30 or 40 years, right? When you think about the bombing of the communities that were making it, because it wasn't just Black Wall Street. It wasn't just in Philadelphia. That was happening a lot. But then you also got to look at what happened with drugs and gangs and how that contribute, because we talk about this as if Black people fought really hard for freedoms and rights and then just went crazy. And now we're all listening to Sexy Red, watching reality TV and smoking blunts. That's not how it happened, right?
Right.
And then even before that, you have to look at what happened during the time post-slavery and during slavery. And there's never been any real fixes to that. Okay. There may be a Band-Aid here and there, but imagine you getting that Band-Aid on and then it's snatched off and then you're punched again right in the same spot. And so there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. Yet and still, there is some truth around the unity piece. We talk about the Willie Lynch, which is also a myth. It wasn't a letter that was actually written, right? But there's some truth in that. There is a level of unity that we should have that we don't have. And a lot of it is in emotion. A lot of it has been weaved into the fabric of the systemic racism that happened with us, where we were taught that other is always better. Okay. So there's a lot going on in that. And I can speak on it from a mathematical standpoint and, get really comfortable with it. But there's a lot of research and all that surrounding and people that can speak on it better than me. But what I would say to it is we have to look at different solutions because the problem is so different from everyone else. And I can tell you that Black people are smart and we do make good decisions. There's no one that budgets better than us. To live on some of the salaries and the income that we're living on and still making, that is amazing. There's no one that works harder than us. To be called lazy after building a whole country is ludicrous. So we have to be mindful of the things to say that we raise other people's children. We're not the people that have others raising our children, babysitters, that have others cleaning our home, going to wash our cars. That's what I call lazy. Right. So we have to be, you started this early. We have to be very careful. I think when you were explaining how always learning came about, we have to be very careful in the language in which we use and how we describe things. Because a lot of times we're just regurgitating the bad narratives that have been told about us. And I'm saying that to say, you give reparations to people. Yes, you're going to have some people that's going to trick off money and do whatever, right? But you're going to have a whole lot of people that are going to do good with the money. Just as the Japanese did when they got their reparations. Look at what happened with the Native Americans in particular in Michigan with getting their casinos and the building up that they're doing, right? We have never received reparations, amends, an apology, anything for what has been done historically. And it's still happening. It just changes forms.
I mean, everything you just said has math beneath it too, though. I mean, this is the thing, there's a fight in the country about what's so-called woke math. And there's an attempt to use, in California and other places, to use the teaching of math as a way to help people decode a very complex world that they're living in, right? And the things that you just mentioned around, first of all, how do the economics work in our, in our community? What did happen? What was the potential for instance, like Durham, the whole kind of Black fraternals that held economic power? What would have been how could we study that? What would have been the power of the Black dollar had we spent more time on the Black Wall Streets, the Rosewoods, the Black fraternals, which now are in decline of what they once were, mutual aid societies. All this has math beneath it. Even the things, though, around, I heard you say something like challenging the myths that surround our lives. One that I have paid a lot of attention to is this idea about fatherlessness. And I've been on a holy tear for years about confronting this particular mythology. And it feels almost like it's become a truism to people so much. They've said it, they've repeated it so much. But if you look at the math of what constitutes so-called fatherlessness, it is not absentee fathering. It's basically an artful cutting of the the research numbers on things like the averages of out of wedlock births. Like how many people were married at the time that they had kids. It doesn't take into account divorce rates, cohabitation, other arrangements in families, and all of that, or actual time that Black men specifically, spend fathering in one way or another for many different ways. And there's math beneath all that. The way that you win that argument is with math, because, when people say 76% of Black children are fatherlessness now, whatever, first of all, it's such a ridiculous statement that gets requoted in
all the time
in journalism all the time. All the time. It almost becomes true. It would take a mathematician to break that down. You know what that means, right? Like to tell our community, others, what's behind those numbers. And the truth is most people don't, but there you go. That's math in real life.
That's math. And that's one that I tackled, that in fact, it is Black men that are the most involved with their children. That's what the real numbers show. And being a father does not mean that you're still with the mother. Right. And so those are the types of things that we have to, be very careful about how we speak, and in particular, how we speak about men, right? Because we have somewhere close to half of the students that are in our classroom are Black boys, or in our homes, Black boys. And so how we speak about Black men is important, because that's who they more closely relate to, even though they may be living with mom predominantly. And so this idea of changing our myths, absolutely, and mathematics being used to solve problems, that's exactly the path. And so I working with one school and helping them to start Madhubuti Scholars after Haki and Safisha Madhubuti here in Chicago. And, Haki Madhubuti was the poet, and they were involved since the 60s. But what it's about using mathematics to solve problems on the south side of Chicago. And so one of the trips that I asked for their teacher to schedule with them is to drive past neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago. And I want you to count the number of liquor stores, beauty supply shops, and churches. And then I want you to take them out to Evanston, Skokie, in the suburbs. And I want to do the same thing. Take a look at their communities versus our communities and do the mathematics behind that, right? And look at what is the impact for that. Certain things that we take for granted, like the beauty. Look at the neighborhoods that some students just have to walk to school in, right? And that has an impact. If it didn't, then why are the suburbs so beautiful? Why they put so much into making sure that things look good for their children, right? The buildings, again, look at the data. When you look at the buildings, the schools in Chicago, and a good 80% of them are 80 years or so old. And the majority of those schools are where? The west and the south side of Chicago, the Black communities, right? And so this is the systemic piece that I speak of. And then how do schools view their parents? Do we view them as intelligent people with children that are capable of learning at high levels? Right. And so all of those things are important with the work that I'm doing personally, the work that I'm doing with my company, which is also Black Math Genius. And that's one of our conversations. We're to always love and respect our children, to treat them the way that you would treat your grandmother, and to make sure that you respect families and parents as well, to make sure that they are part of this journey and the work that we're doing.
What do you think the parent role is as a partner of helping their young people specifically, excel in math, even when they themselves don't feel like they are entirely qualified? What's the parent role? What can parents be told that could be helpful to them?
So I just need to be honest with them. Right now, they're not really qualified, because we left them with their children for 2 years during the pandemic, and them grades plummeted. So right now, parents, y'all aren't qualified. But here's what we can have you do. Instead of binge watching Netflix, binge watch your children. All right. And so what that means is that you shouldn't have to be the one doing the homework. But in some schools, if you're not with a really good school, you may have to find additional supports. But know what's going on with your children. Take the technology away at night. Set a limit for that. Have bedtimes. make sure that they're getting healthy meals and not the sugar and the snacks and the packaged food all the time. So there are some things that if parents just did those things, even if it's what did you work on in mathematics today? Fractions, show me an example that I forgot how to do fractions. Okay, can you teach me that? So it's not that we need them to be teachers at home, which they shouldn't be. We're getting paid as educators every 2 weeks with taxpayers' dollars to do a job. Someone needs to make us do that very well because it's not happening right now. All right. Now, parents, we need parents to parent. Come up to the school. You're sending your children to a school all day for 6 to 8 hours a day. You should know who those adults are that they're with. Know who the principal is, know what the expectations are, know the data on your school. How are they performing? What are they going to do to make improvement? Are you in a situation where the other students are excelling and the Black children aren't? Because that's happening across the country. And it's not just a race thing. Well, it is a race thing because a parent, a white woman told me, she said, you know what? I'm in this district outside of Virginia, where a lot of the politician schools go to and the athlete schools go to. She said, this data that you're speaking about, it even happens with the wealthy, meaning that even when you go to wealthy schools, it's still the Black students at the bottom. So what's happening? That's the cultural piece. And as you said earlier, it's like someone is always teaching you about mathematics through someone else's lens. Who wants to learn that way? What role do I play in this, right? So the cultural piece is what's most important, no matter what the economic demographic is. So parents, we need parents to parent. This technology is taking our children out. It is taking
On
them
the
out.
technology, and the parent, are there any technologies that you think that would be helpful to parents as they try to, parent, as they're trying to be helpful? I mean, I've tried a few. I don't know that they're all equally as good as the other ones, but do you believe in technology as a support for parents that don't feel like they are qualified, but maybe they're trying to do some things at home that bolster the young people's math?
Absolutely. So we get back into it. You can use a knife to cut bread, or you can use it to kill someone, right? You can use TikTok. You can use TikTok to learn, YouTube to learn. With Black Math Genius, what we do is we offer tutoring as a support. I like ChatGPT. So imagine you're a parent at home and you're sitting with your child and you don't know the answer. They tell you one number is 12 times larger than another number, the third number is XYZ, what have you. Going into ChatGPT, say, hey, and teach your child how to do it. Hey, fifth grader, pull up ChatGPT, ask the problem and say, I am a fifth grader. Explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader. ChatGPT will do that. Is that cheating? No. Is it going to make you any smarter? And it can enhance. It's like having a calculator. A calculator did not all of a sudden in the 80s make everyone a mathematician, right?
No.
It was a tool to use to get better. Having a toolbox does not make you a contractor, but a contractor with a toolbox makes them really good with the work that they do. So we can use these tools as just that, tools to enhance their learning and to make it better, because that's how I teach people to use ChatGPT. Parent, if you're having trouble with it, ask a question, say, break it down to them at whatever grade level and explain it step by step. Because the idea is for them to learn it. So then if they understand that, they can get back in school the next day and be able to apply that. It's not just to get the answers. I talk about this early. Mathematics is not about getting the answer. We want them to conceptually understand it so that they learn it. And teachers don't get this yet. I was working with a group of teachers yesterday, and a teacher said to me, well, if we use that other assessment that you're telling us to use, the problems don't look like the problems I'm doing in class. And I said, that's the problem within itself. Because when you're teaching a child to do something, they should be able to do it no matter what the context is. If the standard says to find area of a square, it doesn't matter if I draw a square that looks this way or someone else does a square that looks this way. They should know how to do the standard. So that's what's most important. So yes, I agree with using tools, and there are plenty of things that are out there. Use them. One that I use, that we use in Black Math Genius, that our tutors use, is called Polypad. and anyone can Google that. It's by Mathagon, Polypath. There are all type of virtual manipulatives that you can use to get the point across for students.
No, mentioning how technology can be used differently than, it could be used for good or for evil. You are on TikTok, right?
Yes.
You took math into social media.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what's the impetus for you seeing that as a platform to get the message out, and how's it working?
To get more people interested in mathematics, to help them see mathematics as a beautiful language, to be able to recognize the patterns and cycles. You're not going to catch me doing any type of dancing. I'm not playing around with, does this sound work or that sound work? As I tell people, look, they're going to get this math and they're going to love it or they aren't, right? I'm not doing all that trickery stuff. I'm too old for that, right? But I enjoy just doing the problems and teaching. I love teaching, and I just believe and know that when you introduce any concept to someone with interest, they'll stick around for it. So we did really well. I started posting really heavily January 1st. I kicked off saying I'm going to do January 1st every day. I made it through those first 2 quarters okay. That third quarter kicked my butt. I said, I don't know how people do this every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we got to like over 30-some thousand followers real quick off of that. So I'm happy with it. I'll be doing a lot more with Ed Post and doing more posting as we go into this next quarter, because the response has just been really good. And people are all in the comments saying the same thing. Wish I had you as a teacher. Man, if I had learned it this way, I didn't know that, right? So we're it's Black Math Genius on TikTok. So hop on over and learn some of this math stuff.
I appreciate you so much in so many ways. I wish we had more of you, first of all.
Thank
I
you.
think this is the content that's missing in our life that creates the culture that we want. We need the content to create the culture, to get people interested and to follow and to click and like and share, because this is the positive content that we need. This is what will change our lives. And open a lot of doors. And math is one of the hardest ones out of all of them, to feel like we have some folks who are leading us there. Like, with the reading stuff and general education advocacy, it feels easier. But specifically with the math, number one, to know who are our mathematicians. First of all, let's start there.
Yes.
And then who are our mathematicians that are also educators.
Yes.
Right. Like, this is very important. So thank you, number one, for being with us today.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for the content that you make, right? Yes. And I'm going to try and get over my math anxiety. I'm on a quest to get over my math anxiety, because I got young people at home, right? I got to do it. So so you're an inspiration for that, right?
Thank
you are it's very inspiring to look to someone and say, okay, see, that's possible. That's available to us. That's what good looks like. So that's you. Assata, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.